Hello, everyone. I am Paolo Taviani, Senior Program Manager at Hackquarters Vitality, and welcome to the second session of Market Access. This is a very interesting uh, seminar and workshop, as you call it, on accessing some different markets around the world. In this case, we'll have two interesting points. The first one is MENA, Middle East and North Africa, and the second one in Singapore. Both markets are very interesting. Even though you are in Europe, like me in Spain, and might sound a little bit far, but in my opinion, contamination is innovation. So it's always good to try to find different perspective, different kinds of markets, and see potential good opportunities. I'll start to share the slides, and then I'll uh, present our guest. Let me see. I think I hope, and I think you see the slides.
Paulo, please share the entire screen.
I share the screen. I share the entire screen.
We only see the. We only see.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Better. Can you see the slides and the screen, of course?
Not yet.
Not right now.
Let's wait.
Okay.
Could you please share the entire screen? Now I can see.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Good. So again, welcome everyone to the Market Access, expanding into Singapore and MENA. Today we will have Enterprise Singapore for Singapore and Hafla Ventures for the MENA part, and I will go deep dive into our guest. Let me give you just a brief introduction about what I'm doing and what's about Hackquarters Vitality. As I said, I will be your host today. I'm Paolo Taviani, Senior Program Manager at Hackquarters Vitality. I manage the programs, acceleration programs, and all kinds of innovation programs in Tenity across Spain, Portugal, and Italy. And what about today? So the agenda of today will be like that. So we will start with Ohad Or of Hafla, co-founder and managing partner, and he will present us all the interesting insights and accessing points to MENA. And then we will have Ece Omur from business development manager from Enterprise Singapore, and she will also give some insight and access point of Singapore. And then we will have a panel session, Q&A panel session, so you can ask all the questions. So be prepared, Ohad and Ece. Of course, we will have. I think we will have a lot of interesting questions on our side, and that will be moderated by my colleague Elida. What about Hackquarters? Hackquarters is a startup accelerator and corporate innovation partner based in Istanbul and London, and was awarded as best corporate accelerator in Eastern Europe and Turkey in 2019 by Crunchbase. Working in startup, you may know what Crunchbase is, definitely. And we have more than 100 programs, and we created and of course manage more than 50 startup accelerator. So just calculate how many startups we came across our path. In general, in terms of speaking about startup, we have the 94% startup satisfaction of our programs, and we have more than 1,300 alumni startups. So the database is very huge, and we know a lot of startups in that sense, with a total funding of almost 1 billion. And as I said, we of course are corporate innovation partners, which means that we worked and we're still working, and we also will work in the future with a lot of corporates, huge corporates like HSBC, Google, Baker McKinsey, BNP Paribas, Nestlé, Meta, and of course a lot of interesting and huge corporates. We're still working on it. Especially, of course, Visa. Recently we launched fintech accelerator with them, and in terms of our presence, we have different hubs. UK, Spain, Italy, Turkey, and Portugal. That's for the headquarter parts. And of course, in our platform or in our network, we have more than 400 investors, VC angels, of course, more than 600 mentors, founded expert. So we are in the middle of innovation, and we connect all the interesting dots. So here's the juicy part, because on 2013, on 2023, Tenity, which formerly known F10, bought Hackquarters, and now we all part of the same family. Tenity, as I said, also formerly known as F10, was born as accelerator, and actually was founded as a spin-off of the Swiss stock exchange, SIX, in as I said, in Zurich, and is an independent global open innovation ecosystem and early stage investor, focused on fintech, regtech, deep tech, and insurtech, but with some points of sector agnostic. It depends on the program. And so having this huge family, now we have 6 subs spread across Asia Pacific and Singapore. That's good. That's the funny thing is that one of our hub is in Singapore, and today we'll talk about Singapore, and of course, as I said, Asia Pacific and Europe, comprehensive of Nordic and Baltics. So still, of course, we work with leader corporate partners, and we are, of course, living in the middle of the innovation, working with corporates, investors, mentors, startups, academia side, and our mission is to create one of the biggest ecosystem in innovation ecosystem. Even in this case, so in Crunchbase, we were rewarded as one of the best accelerator and most successful accelerator. So just think about this merge between Tenity and Hackquarters. What new vision can lead. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to the first guest, Ohad Or of Hafla Ventures, co-founder and managing partner, and he will guide us through the MENA access points. Hi, Ohad. Can you hear me, or can you? Because I cannot see the screen, so
I can hear you, Paolo. Thank you.
Perfect. So you can start. I can share the slides for you.
You give me access to the slides, or I will tell you when to.
Just tell me when to move the slides.
No problem. Okay. So hi everyone. It's a pleasure to attend this unique event with participants from Turkey and from other locations in Europe. We've been basically in the past, we had several collaborations with Hackquarters, and we've done interesting sessions in the past. It's our first opportunity to attend this new collaboration with Trinity. So I'm looking forward into this. A few words just before I begin, because my presentation is very, very much focused on the region, on MENA. You'll hear the word MENA a lot, okay? Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey. Basically, without Turkey excluding it. So we're talking about MENA, Middle East, and North Africa. Maybe we'll have some insight about Turkey as well, and then you'll maybe see the phrase MENAT when we include Turkey as well, or I'll include Turkey in my presentation. I'll begin the presentation with a few words about Hafla, the venture that I'm leading for the past few years that specializes in the region, and then we'll flow with interesting insights about the region itself. Yeah, and don't forget, it's a big region. So we'll be talking about the region. I'll give some specific examples about leading countries, but I'm sure that there will be a lot of additional countries left or questions open, because at the end it's a large region that I will try to give you a taste of. Okay, Paulo, you can if you can please move forward to the first slide. So a few words about Hafla. Hafla is a venture that is focused basically on scaling and investing in tech startups in the Middle East, North Africa, and Turkey, by the way. or startups that are basically based in other locations in the world, but are interested in this region specifically. We've been dedicating our experience for the past years in the region, in the potential of this region, which is a very big one, and has become, I think, in the past few years, a much even more relevant one due to the financial situation globally and the more stable countries that we know that are existent in the region. In Hafla itself, we have mainly two arms of activity that we have. One is our venture builder program, which is a kind of an acceleration program, but a bit more, I would say, a bit different and maybe more sophisticated in the focus and the dedication that we work in and basically support the startups in a very dedicated process in fundraising. This is an activity that we've been initiating for the past almost 4 years, very successful with very successful cohorts. We had several startups from Turkey in the past that participated, and from other places in the region and globally as well. So this is one of our main activities and our unique program, which is about a 5-month program. Then we have in addition to that, the second phase, which is called the Scale Up Academy, which is more dedicated phase that we continue with selected startups that go through the first phase of the venture builder. Again, I will not go deep into our activities because that's not the purpose, and just for you to have some sort of an idea about what we do. And we have basically a fund that supports this activity and potentially invests in startups that we find relevant to Hafla's strategy and focus. What makes us quite special, having both a venture builder and a fund working side by side. And again, our focus is the region itself. But yeah, anyone that would like any further questions or inquiries later on about Hafla's activity, dedicated or specifically, you can reach out to me, to one of our team members, and we're very open to collaborate specifically with startups that are interested in this specific region. Go ahead, Paul, please. Okay, so we're talking about the MENA marketplace, Middle East, North Africa. Basically, we are talking about quite a large region. Here in the map, you would see 18 countries. You have the list here at the left, almost 500 million people, very large region, huge opportunities. Some of the countries have a lot of money and interest, as well, growing interest in the tech sector, which we will talk about in a second. But when we're talking about MENA, this is what you have to have in mind. And again, understand that we're talking about a lot of countries. So look at this presentation as something general with some specification, but I must say that when you dive in and try to understand each country by itself, so you can understand that there are specific things that are relevant for one country and aren't for others. Okay, Paulo, please. A bit about numbers, some innovation indexes, and to give you a proportion. So when you look at the Global Innovation Index, you would see here main countries that are part of this region. You can see Turkey based there as the third place, I'm sorry, I see that the left one jumped for some reason, so the numbers are not accurate. So I will look at the right one. Okay, ease of doing business. You have the UAE, which is one of the main ecosystems. Turkey, number 33 out of 190 countries. Israel based number 35, Bahrain, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt. You would see here the main ecosystems that are relevant, but this is basically the rate done at 2023, so it's updated, and you can see that some of the countries are really based on the top scale. Go ahead, Paul, please. About the opportunity in the region a bit. Let's give you some statistics and numbers. Okay, so 95% of the talent pool has a higher education degree. 94% of the population uses a smartphone. You can understand here that the connectivity rate here is amazing, considered maybe one of the most connected regions in the world. 88% of the population is online daily. 80% of the youth indicate they shop online. 30% basically has an advanced degree, an MBA or PhD, and 9 out of 10 use at least one social media channel every day. The demographic factor, more than 60% of the population is under the age of 30. Okay, it's the highest rate in the world. So first of all, it's an incredible number, unparalleled to, of course, if you compare it to Europe and the Western world. But think of it, above 60% of the population is under the age of 30, meaning a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of things happening, and of course shows the potential of the tech sector, because many of these people are interested in joining as entrepreneurs to the sector and raising their own companies. I think it's a good sign for companies from outside that are looking into this potential and even, by the way, potential of finding local partners or local people that you can collaborate on this activity. MENA's population is also extremely tech savvy and ready to embrace new digital technologies. You can see even latest phrases from McKinsey saying that the Middle East and North Africa region is on the cusp of potential entrepreneurship gold rush. I mean, and it's known and seen that there is a huge potential here, and it's basically I can tell you, as a person dealing with this region for quite a while, that you see things moving, you see the evolution, and you see we'll talk about this later on as well, but the growth almost in any aspect regarding to tech. And I think it's a great sign for startups that are considering or wanting to look for new markets or emerging markets, which most of the markets in the region would be considered as. Government support is something that you see as well in specific countries, accelerating and moving forward with a lot of very, very impressive offers and new regulations that have been done and made in the past couple of years. But we'll talk about that as well later on in the presentation. Paolo, please. A bit about numbers. Okay, so the total funding here that you see, basically we see here the numbers in a comparison, basically between 21 and 23. You see here the years, you see the quarters from 21 up to 23 fourth quarter, and for some reason the bottom part here jumped as well in the presentation, but you would see that 22, which was a very impressive year, we're talking about almost $4 billion, 795 deals. Just in comparison, even to Turkey, Turkey is considered a very impressive ecosystem by itself, and usually the numbers up to 22 were quite parallel. You would see the same numbers from Turkey parallel to all of the MENA together. So that puts Turkey in a very impressive position, in the region, and as one of the leading powerhouses of tech that would have a lot to offer. And this is seen, clearly by numbers. Clearly, you would see here a decline in 23, but this is something that you would see in most of the ecosystems globally. But again, when you see the numbers compared to the number of countries, we're talking about a huge potential ahead, and just the initial phases of what's going on today in MENA. Okay, $4 billion. Again, if you look at Turkey alone, that had something similar, that can compare it to Western countries, US, Europe, of course, leading countries. You would see much larger numbers. If you compare it to Israel, for example, you would see 15 or $25 billion per year. So again, it only shows the huge potential that you would see in MENA, and I think it's a great sign for any entrepreneur and company that wants to think about the option of penetrating these markets. Go ahead, Paulo. A bit of country funding comparison, again up to 23. So this is a comparison between 2022 and 2023. So you see Saudi Arabia, basically with almost 4 billion. It's an increase of 33%. and you see the UAE, which was basically number one last year and the years before. UAE was considered the leading ecosystem by capital invested, dropped down almost by 50% to 691 million. Egypt, again, it dropped by 30% to almost 400 million. Morocco, quite an impressive increase to 81. But when you think about the number of $81 million compared to the size of Morocco, this is a number that doesn't make sense in many ways, but again shows the potential. Okay, so we're showing the potential and the growth. So this is to give you a sense. Go ahead, Paulo. Top industries. Leading industries in MENA. Okay, we have fintech. Almost $1.3 billion invested in 23, an increase of 16% compared to 22. E-commerce and retail, $500 million. Healthcare. You see the number 87. And then we have edtech and IT solutions. So these are basically the leading sectors that you would see. And every startup here that has any company basically based in one of these sectors, I think that would be a great sign. But if you don't, it doesn't mean that there isn't any potential. These are just the leading ecosystems. One important factor that I can mention here, quickly is that as a growing ecosystem, and I'm talking about MENA in general, you would see a lot of, and I think you would see this in Turkey as well, and in evolving and and emerging markets in Europe in the past. But at the end, you would see the success stories, and we'll talk about this in a second, are mainly startups and products that were imitated or copycatted from other ecosystems, brought to the region. And most of the successful companies that receive investments are companies that have already proven themselves in other markets and are introducing the products either with companies that have already been active in other countries and coming to MENA, or just launching new startups in the region with similar business models and concepts that worked in other places. This is a natural evolvement of an ecosystem, clearly, and it's happening in the past, let's say, 3 or 4 years in the MENA region. Go ahead, Paulo. Regarding fintech, because I know that there are many of you startups here that are in this sector. So fintech funding in MENA soared to 1.5 billion. We saw that before in 2023. A substantial increase from $500 million in 21. So you see the increase, you see the potential. You have huge countries. You have unbanked populations, that are countless in numbers and sometimes unbelievable. If you look at Egypt for example, you're talking about the country of above 100 million people with around only 10% people that have a bank account. So you can think of the potential of fintech tools and others in this kind of countries and emerging markets. So it makes it interesting. The number of fintech deals closed since 21 has doubled compared to e-commerce, showcasing the sector's rapid growth and investor interest. And with over 800 fintech startups in the MENA, totaling $15 billion, it's evident that fintech is a thriving sector, with the majority of funding originating from the United Arab Emirates. So that was right up to 22. You would see the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia basically chasing down and becoming maybe today the biggest investor, but the UAE is still a very, very impressive player here, and we'll talk about this in a second. Go ahead, Paulo. A bit of names, and to give you a proportion, so top MENA's regional investors, and again by number of deals. Okay, so you won't be impressed here by the numbers invested, but we're talking about the number of deals. One of the reasons I'm showing this is because many of these, which are either accelerators or VCs, which have invested and deployed capital to many startups, have done this in small amounts. So that's why the number of deals are quite high. But it will give you a bit of a sense. So the leading one is an accelerator called Flat 6 Labs, which is already active in most of the region. Could be an interesting point of contact, if anybody is interested. But at the end, you would see almost 250 investments, and then you would have and by the way, the flag here is Egypt, although it's been they have headquarters almost in I think 7 or 8 countries, main countries in the region. Then you would have Okal, which is from Saudi Arabia, which is a VC, Vision Ventures Saudi Arabia, Shuruk Partners, which are from the UAE, OTF. This is an Oman technology fund, not a very big player, but again, trying to move a bit in the scale of deploying capital, small numbers. Global Ventures, then Wamda, Falak, Venture Chuk. Okay, so these are interesting. At the end. Players to follow. There are many additional ones which would be much more impressive in the amount of money that they have deployed. But then you would see very little startups that received higher amounts of money. Here you have potential of different names that are looking for startups. They're looking for seed investment or in their initial stages. So it could be interesting. Go ahead. MENA's unicorns. Okay. By the way, I included here one Turkish, but you would see, and the valuation here is not exactly what it is today. So I wrote here the valuation, which was mainly up to a year and a half ago. You have Fori from Egypt, Kitopi. Fori, by the way, is the fintech startup. Kitopi from the UAE, Swivel. Karim, which is considered, except Turkey, the biggest success story in MENA. Karim basically is a startup that imitated and copycatted exactly what Uber does. Was initiated in the UAE and was acquired by Uber, and this was the biggest acquisition ever of $3.1 billion. And this startup has expanded to many other countries and is considered really the biggest success story. You would see a similar story with Souk.com, which is the startup that imitated Amazon and basically was acquired by Amazon. And you get the picture. So at the end, there is a lot of potential to reach out to the region and introduce startups that and it gives even an advantage if you bring an activity or a startup that has maybe a similar product or has a proven history or track record in other countries, even if it's a different startup, because it gives a sense of both interest, but maybe for potential investors in the region, this is the type of things that they've been looking in. You have some innovation. We'll talk about this later as well, but not a lot. So deep tech startups and so on in the region are not very popular so far. But mainly, this is just to give you a sense. And again, we're talking about a huge region, almost 600, between 500 and 600 million people. And think about it. You have only just a few success stories of companies that reached the valuation of a unicorn, okay, above $1 billion, which is quite amazing, okay, which as I see it, shows a huge potential. Okay, so I'm not telling you this because, look, you only have 4 or 5 startups that reach a valuation of $1 billion. Is telling the opposite. You have a huge region with a lot of potential, huge markets, and still, you just see it in its initial stages of evolution. And I think, it's an interesting sign for anyone that is considering entering these markets. Go ahead, Paulo. This slide, I think, is worth focusing a bit, because I think it's a great going to tech events and summits, is one of the most recommended things a startup can do, or founders of a startup can do, in order to connect, see trends, give you the opportunity as a stage to present yourself. So if you're interested in the region, I really suggest basically remembering some of the names that are mentioned here. Mainly, I would talk about GITEX, which is the biggest tech event in the region, which is in the UAE every year, usually sometime around October. And that's a very, very recommended event. You just want to get a sense. If you even don't want to participate, go there and you will be overwhelmed. You'll see a very impressive event with most of the tech ecosystem presenting there and being part of. Huge event, but again, very impressive. Like most of the let's say well-respected events in the UAE, which is known for the big shows they know how to initiate. Then we have STEP as well in the UAE. It's a smaller event, more dedicated, very oriented to startups, which I recommend a lot. It's a much smaller event than GITEX, but this is an opportunity to showcase and present your companies. And in addition to that, this is an event that you'll have much easier abilities to interact with investors, to schedule meetings, to meet local VCs. And it's a very it's let's say a lighter and more sexy product than GITEX, which is a gigantic event. So I recommend this as well. It's usually at around the same time, a few weeks before or after. And there is a STEP conference and summit in Riyadh in Saudi as well. So they have one in Riyadh and they have one in the UAE. Both are very much recommended and a great opportunity to get to see what's going on. Then we have LEAP in Saudi Arabia, very impressive event as well. Recommend it, and again, great opportunity to connect to what's going on in Saudi and either present yourself or look out for potential investors and trends and so on. So these are the three that I wanted to mention. You have Techni in Egypt if you're interested in the Egyptian market. And by the way, just to mention the Future Investment Initiative, which is in Saudi Arabia, I wrote it down here just in order to mention that this is becoming the next, let's say, or not the next, but a parallel event for Davos in the region. It's a very, very impressive high-level event, which is becoming a main event, showing the presence in the MENA region, showing the importance that is given to countries like Saudi Arabia today, and of course everything is initiated from the capital and money that behind those countries. So this is a very impressive event by itself to follow, to see what comes out, to see who goes there. Yeah, go on, Paulo. I'll dive in just to give you a taste, as I said in the beginning, about a few countries. We don't have a lot of time. So again, this is only a taste from a macro point of view. So the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC countries, I guess most of you have heard of this sometime. And if not, so it's a good time to hear about them. We're talking about Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman. Okay, these are the Gulf countries, usually connected to oil when you think about it, and to power and money and so on. They're very different. You see the size, you see the locations, major countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, which is considered small, but a very massive player in general in everything. Even if you look at the geopolitics, or you look at the oil aspect or the tech aspect, or when you compare the sovereign wealth funds, so UAE and Saudi are leading this council for years. You have Qatar. You've seen it part of the last World Cup, and smaller countries like Bahrain and Kuwait. Each one is a different ecosystem, very special, and located in a very different place connected to the tech sector. So you need to dive into each country to understand, what are the trends, what are the options, what are the opportunities. One thing I can say for sure, all of them are interested in attracting foreign talent, in attracting startups to their ecosystems, to developing the tech sector. Some of them have ability to invest. Some of them are looking for success stories and giving great incentives. We'll talk about that as well later on. But this is something we'll dive into. And Egypt, which is the biggest country in the region, but still with a lot of options, a lot of opportunities, but considered, in a different stage financially and as well when you look at the stability and things like that. So yeah, go ahead, Paulo. So this is, I prepared a few slides, to sum up a bit of the numbers. So if you look up at the top right, so the UAE, United Arab Emirates, population 9.2 million, very small country. Unemployed rate only 4%, youth unemployment almost 8%. GDP, you see the number. Population under 30, again, high numbers, almost 41%. Life expectancy almost 79. Numbers, total annual funding, talked about it before, but the left scale is in millions of dollars. So when you see 1,000, it's $1 billion. So you see the drop in 23. You see 22 as the top year of almost 1.2 billion. Quite impressive to the size of the country and for it to being in its initial stages. A lot of things are occurring there, and I would definitely consider it today still, even compared to Saudi and others, as the leading hub and leading ecosystem in the region. Largest startups by valuation, we mentioned Karim, Kitopi, and Souk. So these are the success stories, let's call it. Most active investors. So here we are talking about the investors per investment and not per number of deals. Venture Souk, Shuruk Partners, Wamda Capital, Middle East Venture Partners, and Faster Capital. These are private VCs. Okay, this is not including the government funds, the sovereign wealth funds, which I'll talk a bit maybe later on, which have potential as well with startups that are interested in penetrating the market. But yeah, this is to give you a glimpse of the UAE. Go ahead, Paulo. KSA, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Okay, population 35 million people. Unemployment rate 7.4, youth unemployment almost 30%. Don't forget the numbers from the UAE, so it's a huge difference. GDP larger than the UAE. Population under 30, 70%. Life expectancy 75. Largest startups are valuation. Okay, Sari, Uniphonic, Nana, and Retailo. And the most active investors are Kaust, Vision Ventures, Okal, Saudi Venture Capital, and Ride Ventures. These are all private VCs again. I mean, some of them have support from the government, but they're considered private. And again, not including the government entities that are very active. One of the projects which I will not talk about here, but I will mention, which any person that is interested in Saudi or the region should read about and look into, is NEOM, a very impressive project of almost $500 billion being built, a whole city ecosystem, which is expected to be the highlight of Saudi Arabia in the next 10 years. Look into it. A lot of things are going on there and a lot of funding opportunities and incentives to connect to that unique project. Go ahead, Paulo. A glimpse about Egypt for comparison. We're talking about the biggest country in the region, 100 million people, above 100 million people, unemployment rate 9.2, youth unemployment 30%, very high numbers, GDP, population under 30, 60%, and life expectancy 72. Largest startups evaluation, Halan, Trella, Maksab, Capitier, and most active investors would be Flat 6 Labs, Falak, Algebra Ventures, Kyra Angels, and InnoVentures. Huge country, a lot of potential, basically has no connection to the GCC countries, and this would be very much dedicated for startups that are interested in that market, which has a lot to offer, but has its own opportunities, problems, regulations, and should be very well researched by itself. Go ahead. Yeah. So basically, that was the last slide. Again, in the time that I received, I tried to give you a kind of a glimpse of and a taste of MENA. There's a lot to go into in addition. And we have some further Q&A questions that are on the panel, and I guess we'll make things clearer. You're on mute, Paolo. Yeah.
Okay, unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks, Ohad. Thanks for the presentation. It was really interesting, especially for me that I don't know at all the MENA market. So it was really enlightening on my sides, but I'm sure that during the panel you will have so many questions about well, the potential opportunities in MENA. Okay, so let's go to a little bit more on East, especially on Southeast Asia. So we'll see some points and insight on Singapore, thanks to Ece Omur, Business Development Manager of Enterprise Singapore. Hello, Ece.
Hello, Paolo.
So,
thank you.
Good to see you, and good to welcome you here in this market access. And as for Ohad, just tell me to move the slides, and I'll leave you the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Paulo. Indeed, we move on to the very, very far east region. I assume the participants are very familiar with the MENA region, but they don't really familiar with Asia itself. As a Turkish people, we don't know that region very well. I should say that. So first, I will start my presentation by introducing Singapore as a region. After that, I will talk about my organization, which is Enterprise Singapore, and other support mechanisms of Singapore government. And then I will delve into the innovation ecosystem of Singapore. Next slide, please. So as Turkey, Singapore is also has a very strategic location at the crossroad of international trade and commerce. And this location has been a key factor in its economic success and global significance. So Singapore is also a port country, which has the busiest and most efficient ports in the world. Plays also a very central role in Southeast Asia with its flow of goods and services between Asia, Europe, and America. Also, Singapore is known for multinational corporations seeking a regional headquarters in the region. They prefer Singapore at this matter. And also Singapore is facilitated as a financial and investment hub, attracting a capital all around the world. Next slide, please. So I wanted to also give you some fun facts about Singapore, which has really interesting qualities, the country. Singapore is a city, but also a state and a capital. So making it one and only 3 city-states in the world. The other ones are Vatican and Monaco. It's a city, not just one, but the island, not one island, but 64 islands, offshore islands. They speak English, but that's the Singaporean English. It's a bit hard to understand, but you get used to it once you started to hear more. It has the tallest man-made waterfall at Changi Airport. You may maybe recognize it from the picture above. It has the first Formula 1 night race and one of the greenest city in the world. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk about Singapore's economic transition. Currently, Singapore is one of the strongest country in the world, but it wasn't like that back then. So in 1965, Singapore separated from Malaysia and became an independent country. As I mentioned, Singapore was initially serving as a trading post for goods passing through the region. After 60s, around 70s, Singapore embarked on a new strategy on industrialization, focusing on more manufacturing and export-oriented growth, and promoted the development of industries such as electronics, petrochemicals, and engineering. When the time came to 1990s, Singapore shifted a knowledge-based economy, emphasizing services such as finance and high-value industries, and the development of the finance service industries, including banking, insurance, and asset management, became a key pillar of the economy and still is. In the recent years, Singapore has placed a strong emphasis on innovation, technology, research, and development. And government heavily invested on a vibrant innovation ecosystem, supporting startups and promoting technological advancements. Next slide, please. So this snapshot provides a brief overview of Singapore's demographic and composition and an economic status. As you can see, currently it's around 6 million people, diverse mix of ethnics, including Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others. This makes Singapore is a very inclusive and business-friendly region, I would say. And Singapore ranks high in global competitiveness index with its strong business environment, infrastructure, and innovation capabilities. As I mentioned beginning of my slides, Singapore also is a major trading hub, focusing on international trade and investment. The country has actively pursued free trade agreements and regional economic partnership to expand its market access. Next slide, please. Here you can see the economic character of Singapore, which I mentioned before, that is strongly emphasis on the services, including finance, trades, logistics, manufacturing, and high-tech industries are also playing a significant role in the economy. Next slide, please. As a major financial hub and a trading port, Singapore constantly ranked among the top countries when it comes to doing business, business in the world. The government's pro-business policies, strategic location, and well-developed infrastructure attracted multinational corporations, as well as big startups and unicorns. Next slide, please, Paolo. Of course, the government is not alone. There are many organizations and agencies involved business and innovation in Singapore. These institutions have various roles to play in promoting countries' economic growth, supporting innovation, and enhancing the competitiveness of the Singaporean businesses. So as you can see at this slide, the Enterprise Singapore, the organization I'm from and work for, is under the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And together with our other sister agencies, we develop strategies, initiatives, tools to build Singapore into a vibrant and resilient economy. So our colleagues in the other agencies, as you can see, EDB, focus on the foreign direct investment, GTC, develop future-ready business spaces, clusters, and A-Star is our national research agency who would foster R&D, like TÜBİTAK in Turkey, for those who are familiar with TÜBİTAK. So as Enterprise Singapore, we are the counterpart of TÜBİTAK here in Turkey, because we don't have a branch of A-Star doesn't have an branch office in Turkey, but we work closely with all of the sister agencies. So what we do as Enterprise Singapore, we are government agency. Our key mandates include driving Singaporean companies to grow international, go global, strengthen Singapore as a global trade and innovation hub. We are also the standards and accreditation body focused on building trust in Singaporean products or services. We do the other way around as well. We help Turkish companies or other companies expand in the Singapore, but also in the region, in the Southeast Asia. Next slides, please. We have more than 35 offices all around the world. The regional directors based in the offices to help Singaporean companies go global and find opportunities in the other markets. We have 4 offices in Europe: Frankfurt, Istanbul, London, and Moscow. So I'm based in Istanbul, Turkey. But from our Istanbul office, we cover the whole Central Eastern Europe region, as well as Caucasus, Russia, Turkic states, so on. Next slide, please. So moving on to the innovation ecosystem of Singapore. Singapore has connected ecosystem with various innovation enablers. In the next slide, you can see our ecosystem here, which offers a valuable environment for startups with government support, funding opportunities, and strong network of incubators, accelerators, and venture capital firms. You can see some of them on the slides. But if you wanted to learn more, you can always contact with me. I can share the slides with you, or more information on the specific incubators or VCs. Currently, Singapore ranked 8th in the Global Innovation Index as of 2021, reflecting its innovation capabilities and ecosystem. The country is home to over 4,000 startups and innovation hubs, more than 3,000 innovation hubs, such as Block 71, GTC Launchpad, which provide a collaborative environment for entrepreneurs and innovators. Also, VC firms in Singapore has a diverse pool of VC firms, let's say, including both local and international investors, providing startups with access to a wide range of funding opportunities. And when it comes to the specific sectors and investments, VCs often specialize in, of course, technological startups, including healthcare, fintech, sustainability. These are the main sectors. Next slide, please. This summarizes the investment ecosystem of Singapore. The government launched various of initiatives support startups, which includes companies as well as universities, some grants, mentorship programs, and access to international markets. I will elaborate on the programs a bit later. But in 2020, Singapore investment 25 billion Singapore dollar in research, innovation, and enterprise development to strengthen its position in innovation and technology. Next slide, please. As Enterprise Singapore, we have been actively building and broadening our network across innovation hubs to drive exchange in ideas, knowledge, and talent. So we launched this Global Innovation Alliance program, GIA in short term, as we say it, in 2017. And this network has in over 15 cities, including 4 in Southeast Asia. We work with different appointed partners, which you can see on the slide, their names and the cities, to run GIA acceleration programs. For example, in Jakarta, Manila, we work with Plug and Play. In Bangkok, we work with RISE. So you can also check whether there's a GIA program in your city. Currently, there's no GIA program in Turkey, but we have other programs, which I will tell you more about later. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in terms of co-innovation programs and the program that we run in Turkey, we can talk about more on the R&D side. So with this R&D co-innovation programs, we encourage our startups, SMEs, to find overseas partners to collaborate on innovation projects. So as you might be aware, the Eureka network funded by EU consists of EU countries. However, Singapore became an associate country in 2021. That means that companies can apply these Eureka funds with a Singaporean partner. In 2021, we received over 20 applicants' project ideas from Singapore and Turkish consortiums on developing R&D. Currently, 4 of these projects has been funded, still being funded. And this year, we recently opened the call. I will share the link to this call that you can see all the details and application process. And if you if you need a partner from Singapore or Turkey, other way around, you can always contact with me. We also support companies to form a consortium to apply these co-innovation programs. Next slide, please. As open innovation, co-innovation becomes increasingly important strategy for all companies, Singapore's ecosystem is also key to catalyzing business functions such as corporate ventures, product design and development, and corporate R&D. So we also see that more corporates are embracing open innovation challenges now. We are currently developing one in Turkey together with one of the largest banks in Turkey, which we will launch at the end of March. Maybe I'm sharing too much now, but we are at a very close group. So I would say that it's going to be on the fintech sector. So since we started the Open Innovation Network in 2019, around 500 challenge owners have rolled out 900 challenge statements on the network. You can check the challenges and apply these challenges if you are interested. Next slide, please. So to connect all these various stakeholders in the ecosystem, Startup SG was created with the aim to provide startups the opportunity, the means to enter Singapore through entrepreneur work visa, discover new business opportunities, raise a capital, or get access to a space, access to a talent, or even find a founder. So you can check these websites, actually. Each of them has a different page, shows you different various grants and schemes. But for some of them, you need to have a Singaporean partner. So either someone you cooperate with, or either you found one of your founders or a distributor. So you have to have a cooperation with a Singaporean startup, corporate, or venture in order to get support from these platforms, I would say. Moving on to the next slide. I wanted to share one of the biggest technological events, innovation and technological events in Asia, which is a Switch, Singapore Week of Innovation and Technology, take place in Singapore in fall, hosts more than 600 speakers, 4,000 of startups every year. Switch Global actually offers an international partners the opportunity to extend their network to the global audience and engaging industry leaders from the Southeast Asia. So Switch also has a startup competition called Slingshot. It's a public international competition where all startups can apply. We announced these weeks and competition through Hackquarters as well. So this year actually, you can follow up the news and apply to this year's challenge. Next slides, please. These are some of the startups who won the Slingshot. So startups participating in the competition not only participate for the prize money, but also has access to investor deal making sessions or some special mentor clinics with corporates or some ecosystem partners, which help them grow and explore new business opportunities in Singapore and Southeast Asia region. You can see some of the alumni from the competition here. Next slide, please. Talent. This slide is about talent in Singapore actually, because talent has always been an integral for the enterprise growth. Some of the fast-growing tech companies build up their talent pool in Singapore in the light of accelerating demand for digitalization and tech. So you can see that Zoom is opened a data center in Singapore in 2020 and hired engineers and other talent from that region. Next slide, please. This is a similar what the previous slide, let's say. Most of the big companies also set up their test beds, testing areas in Singapore, which allows startups, other tech companies to use these test beds for their benefits. So they can test their solutions with this corporates. Next slide, please. These are some of the startups, even unicorns. Insider is a Turkish unicorn which has a headquarters in Singapore and expanded in the Southeast Asia from that headquarters, now serving 600 million people. If we consider the whole Southeast Asia, that's the population actually. You can see Vice here, and Acronis from Russia. Before closing up finishing my presentation, I wanted to give you the details of the Eureka Singapore-Turkey bilateral call. We encourage all Turkish startups which are developing R&D, product or service, no matter their sectors. We don't have a sector-specific call. This is not a sector-specific call. To apply this call, if you have a project idea or if you wanted to collaborate with a Singaporean company specifically in the framework of this call, you can directly contact with me. We can help you to find a Singaporean partner for you. So you can apply for this Eureka call with your project idea, where you may get a funding for your project. You can directly access the webpage from this QR code. So next slide, please. So if your company have a unique, innovative product or process, or willing to connect and find a place in one of our ecosystems, or wants to network or just explore potential partnership ecosystem at some of the events in Singapore, let's meet. At the last slide, you can see my contact details. Thank you.
Let me unmute. Okay. So thanks, Ece, for this very insightful market access point. I think it's very interesting to see. As I'm seeing, Singapore is, although it's very far from Europe, it's very well connected, and you have a lot of interesting points to share. So again, thanks, Ece. Thanks, Ohad. Now it's the time for the other questions. Let me see if I'm sharing. So we will start. We will do the Q&A panel session now, which will be moderated by Elida, my colleague. And so I will leave the floor and stop sharing. And let's start with some questions.
Well, thank you so much, Paolo, Ohad, and Ece. Thank you so much for being with us today. We prepared a couple of questions about the topics that our entrepreneurs may be curious about. But for our audiences, if you have any questions, please leave that in the chat box so we can ask to our speakers. So if you're ready, I'm starting because we are all wondering some of the topics. You mentioned about the countries and the regions that entrepreneurs might want to expand their businesses, but what are the key factors that startups should consider when entering the markets of MENA and Singapore, such as regulatory requirements or cultural differences? Or maybe you can mention about the steps if startups decide to expand their business in those countries. Ohad, why don't you go first?
Okay, with pleasure. I just want to, before I answer a question, I want to emphasize a few things. Due to the fact that I'm not focusing on one country, as Singapore, which is maybe much easier to focus. So most of my answers, I guess, would be general. Okay, speaking. But again, I'm mentioning what I mentioned at the beginning. It really differs from country to country. So there is not, I mean, it's impossible to give an answer for a question like this about the region itself, okay? Because when you talk about MENA, it's very, let's say, sexy to say, so this is the MENA region, one happy family, and it sounds great, but when you look at the different countries in it, 18 countries, each one is totally different. The regulations, the focus, the scenarios, the leading sectors, etc., etc. So I will give some more general answers. By the way, I see the presentation and not you for some reason. Is that in purpose? I see. I think it would be maybe nicer if we see the faces and not the picture itself, but whatever you prefer. Anyway, in addition to that, I want to mention a few things about Hafla. So that could be an interesting leverage by itself for later on. Basically, as I said, we work with startups. We have a venture builder. We have a dedicated arm that works on business development, working with the startups themselves, leading them to MENA, assisting them in penetrating and entering the markets in different countries, assisting them in raising capital, introductions, and so on. So just this is the last time I will say this, so things are clear. It's any startup from this session that would be interested in any additional information, I just put in the chat, our website. You can enter, you can submit, your application or whatever. We reply everyone. So that's something that just keep in mind. Regarding your question, so quickly, I would say that the main things that the startups should consider, and this is right to many markets, not only MENA, but in general, there is the regulatory compliance, understanding the local laws and regulations. Again, I cannot be specific here about specific countries because they differ totally from country to country. Cultural adaptation, you're talking about a different culture, of course. Okay, learn about the social norms and customer behavior, market research, and analyze competition, demands and trends, localization, customize products and marketing for local audiences. You need to do, some work before that in order understanding the specific country. Creating and collaborating with the local partners, again, would be very specific from country to country. Financial planning, assess costs, see that you have enough money in order to do this move in entering to a new market, which is usually a very expensive move and has to be very much calculated, specifically in this time of a period of time that we're living in. Technology adaptation, align tech solutions with local infrastructure and regulations, and mitigate your risk management, to identify and mitigate potential risks. At the end, regarding the region itself, you have to be very specific with the country you want to focus on, and you're planning to enter and do those highlights and mentions specifically regarding the country. I recommend to work on the right connections. Find an expert that would assist you in the process, specifically entering to a different country that you don't know. Just like the last presentation that Ece basically presented. Seems like a very, very impressive partner, to collaborate when you're considering to enter Singapore. So you have those as well. I will give later on some examples about specific, entities that I recommend to specifically in the UAE. But this is, for now, for your question. I hope.
Thank you so much. Ece, how about you? How are the things in Singapore?
Actually, I couldn't agree the Ohad more about regulations and legal structure, because considering that the chewing gum is illegal, forbidden in Singapore, Singapore is a house of regulatory compliances and legal structure, actually. So I would advise startups who wants to set up business in Singapore to search these regulatory requirements and legal structure based on their sector and industry. Because each has its own implications in terms of liability, taxation, compliance. It's different. For that, actually, we have an headquarters in Singapore, obviously, and we have different departments focusing on different schemes. We work with some local partners, such as local law firms, local taxation companies. Also, our departments can help you to connect with those partners. For you to receive a direct and true knowledge, true information for these things. But apart from regulation, I would say that Singapore has a very competitive market, because it's a very small market. It has a very limited market size if we are just talking about Singapore, but not the region itself. So which may also affect foreign startups to expand in Singapore. So I would advise startups to do their market research. Conduct a market research involves all insights about customers' needs and behaviors in the Asian, in Southeast Asia parts. Also do a competitor analysis, maybe, because they can study their competitors in the markets, so they can develop their strategies based on their competitors' models, let's say.
Thank you so much for showing the path. Let's move on to the other side. So I'm wondering, what challenges do startups typically face when entering these markets, and how they overcome them? Do you have any examples?
Maybe Ilayda, I already shared some challenges as a limited market size and the competition because Singapore has a large number of startups and established companies vying for the market share, and this can make it challenging for the new entrants. But through Enterprise Singapore, startups can find a right, suitable space for themselves. We introduce them with the umbrella organization. So if you're a fintech startup want to expand in Southeast Asia, we connect you with the Singapore Fintech Association. That is our approach to overcome the challenges. But also, maybe I also share that Singapore has a very high cost of living, which can also challenges for startups in terms of hiring and retaining talent, as well as managing the operational costs. But once you are in Singapore and you have a startup Singapore entity, this will enable startups to receive fundings and grants. This may maybe answer your question.
Thank you, Ohad. This is a general question for you again, but can you give us an examples about the challenges that startups can face?
Yes, sure. So first of all, I would say one of the most relevant ones would be the language barrier. We are talking about a region that the dominant language is Arabic. Again, when you're coming as an international startup, like in many other countries, you would clearly keep in consideration English, but I wouldn't neglect or think that you can succeed in the region without focusing as well in some ways in adaptation to the Arabic language. You have a lot of examples of startups that have been very successful, leading their products and their activities in English. So it's totally capable, but it depends who is the who are your customers, what countries again, if you would talk about the GCC countries compared to Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, think about Morocco. Then there you have French, for example. So you have an amazing advantage as a French speaker or startup coming from French-speaking countries, and so on and so on. So language and would be one thing. Then you have the culture and norms and so on. Understanding, the local culture. Things are conducted differently. Meetings are conducted differently. And again, it depends where you're from, because we're talking here to an audience that come from several countries. So if you're Turkish, you might be maybe a bit more familiar with Middle Eastern norms and ways of conduct business. If you come from Europe, so it's a total different thing. The levels, how you build the meeting, how you create trust, how you conduct things. I would say quite slowly. In general, again, speaking general, so you have the regulatory complexity that we spoke about before. You have, market fragmentation. So again, I would again say you have to focus on specific countries and a specific country, okay, and prioritize your markets, adapt your strategies, build scalable models as well. Look at your competitors. Many of them would be local, to see what advantages are you bringing here as the startup coming from outside. Some of the countries have some political instability and even even issues that might be relevant to security issues and so on. So these are type of challenges that I would say that an entrepreneur would confront. Yeah, and having said that, I would say that if I would recommend today a startup coming from Europe or Turkey, I would most definitely recommend to try and focus more as a starting point, even if that's not your market, because clearly most of the startups there are not focusing on that market. But the UAE is really considered as the most developed hub, which is mainly a gate to the other countries and gate to even the other regions. So I think the UAE today, compared to New York, to London, to other very impressive hubs by itself, is super impressive, has a lot to offer, and I think it's a great starting point.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I know that many of the MENA region's countries' governments are supporting startups as well, I think.
You're asking?
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. But let's move on to my other questions. You are both working with different types of entities right now, and how can startups leverage the expertise and resources of embassy representatives to navigate the market access process in your regions?
Who do you want to begin?
Maybe you this time.
You meaning Ohad? Okay. So look, I will tell you this regarding embassy representative in general. You know, I can tell you as a person that has conducted many interactions with diplomats and embassy representatives, and as well. I come from a family of diplomats, so I know this from the other side. You need to consider something very, very clear, first of all. And this is my opinion, but I'm saying this because it's very important to find where are the advantages. Embassy representatives, which are basically diplomats in the countries, are people that have been trained in very specific for very specific missions, and usually, again, I'm saying usually, most of them don't really know anything about tech. Okay. So first of all, you need to identify the right people, and usually the person that deals with this kind of things in an embassy would be the commercial attaché, which is the person who deals with commerce and deals basically with everything that is connected to commerce, economy, and business in general. Of course, you have the ambassador and so on, but at the end, highlighting and focusing on the person that's his mission, I would say is one thing. Now, I recommend, if you think of this as a potential, first of all, to try and reach out to the local embassy of the country that you're interested in your country itself. So if you're interested in the UAE, I would try and see with the local embassy of the UAE in Turkey, first of all, how can I connect to them, create a meeting, try to see with the commercial attaché or some of the team members there that you would conduct a meeting to see and tell them that you're interested in entering their country. You would find potentially maybe incentives, you would find maybe programs, delegations, or things that would assist, because that's one of the missions that an embassy or diplomats have in each country, to attract potential to their country. And one of the things is commercial or financial entities or ventures. So beginning there, that will be one main thing. Look for grants that are issued from the countries themselves. And I would say at the end, one last thing. Once you meet a person that is relevant or is interested, try to be very specific with what you need and try to give very small, let's say, requests. I would recommend when you interact with these people, mainly focus on potential introductions, because I think that's the main thing that they can assist with. At the end, they work for the government. They are, government clerks in an embassy, and they don't manage, huge budgets by themselves. Everything is quite complicated, but they can do great introductions. So if they can introduce you to local partners, or they can introduce you for government entities that can support, or they can introduce you maybe even to investors. I mean, that's usually doesn't happen, but try to be very specific. And those are my recommendations from my experience.
Thank you so much. Ece, how about in Singapore?
I totally agree with Ohad in terms of being specific and very clear about your intention. What do you want to do? Are you looking for an investment? Are you looking for a partnership? Are you looking for a distributor, or just want to receive some information on the market itself? I don't know. Enterprise Singapore is the organization that they need to contact. Actually, the startups companies needs to contact. There is a Singaporean embassy in Ankara, but as Ohad mentioned, that the mostly commercial attachés are working on these fields, and I'm working with the commercial attaché. Our regional director entitled also as a commercial attaché. As I told you, we are based in Istanbul. So for receiving assistance in a market research, business matching, or capability development, or even joining an event in Singapore, or if you are already going to Singapore and don't know whom to meet, you can always contact with me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. So I'm moving on to another question, which is a pretty hot topic for the entrepreneurs. I think you are both mentioned about the investment firms in the region or also in the country. So I believe there are many different types of funding opportunities, but how our entrepreneurs can access those funding opportunities? Do you have any tips to reach out for the investors?
Maybe I'll continue, Ilayda. It will be a very short answer. Unfortunately, Singapore government does not directly invest in foreign startup. As I have mentioned during my presentation as well, if you have a Singaporean partner or a founder or a member or VC, then the other incubators and accelerators or government financing schemes, grants, then will be available for you. But there are also some incubators, accelerators, which is open to all, providing not direct investments, funding as a grant, but a mentorship or access to networks in the region. I think that these are also valuable. Financing part, I also mentioned the Eureka call. I think it's very important that the startups, companies who develop R&D or who has an idea to develop an R&D product or service, I encourage them to apply for the Eureka funding.
Thank you so much. Ohad, do you have any tips or how our entrepreneurs can reach out to investment firms in the region?
Yes, I will mention a few. Okay, so in my answer, I will as well try to give a bit more of a focus on the UAE. So there are some concrete examples and not general. But basically, of course, I began with a presentation. With the tech events, I think presence is very important to come to see, to present yourself, and once you're focused in a country, there are a lot of opportunities to meeting a lot of local investors, people in the UAE, in Saudi, in the GCC countries specifically, are always looking for potential and for promising entrepreneurs and startups. You have to understand one thing, that I didn't talk about before, but in order to be considered in specifically in the GCC countries, which I would say would be the most relevant to most of you, you have to understand that you have to locate some of your activity in those countries. I mean, if you think that you can come as a foreign startup and start, raising capital, specifically from the government entities, of course, and I will talk about government entities will not consider you unless you're located in the country itself. Okay, either Saudi or either UAE, you have to be located, and I will talk about this in a second. Private VCs and so on, it's always an option, but again, most of them will give preference to startups that are close and are located in those countries. You have accelerator programs that are deploying capital, again, not huge amounts of money, but are looking for startups that have the potential to expand in the region. So that's one of the aspects that we'll be looking into. I recommend a few names that you can consider and look into, just as examples. First of all, I recommend all of you to look into the free zones, which are offered in the UAE. These are financial centers that were created with very unique incentives and very unique regulations. They have regulations by itself. It's like an island inside the countries. There are different free zones. Two examples in the UAE you would find, for instance, the DIFC in Dubai, and the other one in Abu Dhabi would be the ADGM. Okay, you should look into those. They just, for example, would give you incentives of zero taxation. Okay, I don't know if you can compare it to other countries, but there are some. But you can come with your company and you can basically work for years, and they would promise you zero taxation. They would give you incentives for opening an office. They would give you incentives sometimes even if you are a promising startup. They would give you incentives. I have examples of startups that received payment for 2 or 3 years for employees, received payment as incentives for office space for a few years, receive incentives for apartments for employees for a few years, specifically in Abu Dhabi. These countries are looking for talent, and that's something that if you have a promising company, if you have track record, if you have proved something, and you're not only in your initial stages, you have a lot to be offered. And if not, again, joining local programs, for example, as I can mention two, for example, Hub 71, which is considered the leading acceleration program in the UAE, or which is considered, it's based in Abu Dhabi, or Shira, which is based in Sharjah, which is another area. I mean, those are programs that you can join, you can learn a lot, and they will try to connect you to a lot of investors. And by the way, Hafla ourselves, this is part of what we do with companies in assisting them to raise capital and introductions and working on their business development. I will mention a few words about the government. You would find several leading funds that are belong to the government. I mean, not like in Singapore, they do invest in startups, and they do invest in VCs. So, for instance, the Dubai Future District Fund is one example that has deployed capital to many startups in early stages as part of their incentive, but they would do so only if you locate yourself in Dubai. You would see El Waha, for instance, in Bahrain, which is another example, and there are others. So you would see a lot of opportunities from government. So this is something to look into as well. And there is the family offices, which again, there are quite a lot. I can say that the most sophisticated investors, specific from the Arab countries, they really like name dropping. They like very impressive people sitting on your board. They like to see traction. They like to see collaborations or partnerships with impressive brands, global brands. Once you have these, your potential rises dramatically. If you don't have that, and this is one of the gaps in the region, by the way, I would say is that you're looking at a very big region with very little capital invested, compared to the size, and it's because it's a cultural gap. People here still are not investing, very quickly in startups because it's risky, and they looking for things that would lower the risk. And one of the things is to see that your startup is you have very impressive people that are part of it. So if you're planning to go into the region, to those countries, I would suggest creating an impressive board and a structure of people that can back what you're saying and have their credibility, because it means a lot. I hope I answered.
Yeah, you pretty much answered in all of those angles in a way. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget, I don't want to forget to mention that Tenity is a part of Singapore tech ecosystem, and they invest in their incubation program as well. So these are the questions that we prepared for you, but we have another question in the Q&A box. Ohad, I believe this question is for you. Can you see that?
Where?
In the Q&A chat. I believe not. Right?
Let me see. I don't think so.
Okay, I can...
I shared that from chat.
1 second.
Let me read that so our audiences can also hear the question as well. Saudis changed their minds and they're more welcoming for investment to their countries, but how about for startups for inviting to their country? Do they have special pockets or benefits?
I'm trying to understand the question for a second.
This is a question for Saudi Arabia, I believe.
Do they have special pockets or benefits? What, for the startups themselves?
Yeah, for startups themselves, as I understood.
Okay,
It's just if they are more welcoming, if a foreign startup wants to enter and or wants to raise capital, mostly on Saudis, how is I think I'm trying to translate it. Are they more open into investing in foreign startup? And if yes, do they have special pockets or packet? I think benefits or how is this perspective? I just wanted to rephrase, I think.
Okay. So first of all, I don't know compared to what, because it's not clear what is the comparison. If it's more. So anyway, what I can say is this, because again, it's we're talking about a huge country. This is a country, Saudi Arabia, and by the way, it's same thing with the UAE, and you would see the drift with the other GCC countries. This is a country with enormous amounts of money. They are in a stage of building their ecosystem. They are in a stage of creating their VC funds. They're in a stage of attracting talent. They are building a $500 billion city that is supposed to be the peak of tech and innovation globally. So the answer is yes, definitely there is a lot of potential, but we're still talking about a very conservative, let's say, traditional, country, which is shifting towards the more innovative side of things. Still many regulations and many things that are opening up. I mean, compared to the UAE, they're still behind. They're still behind the development stage that the UAE has gone through. That's why I recommended considering the UAE, as the first option. But most definitely, Saudi is very potential. You have already a few very impressive funds that are backed by the government, private funds, but are backed by the government that are looking for global talents. And I began with this, in the beginning of the presentation. I think Turkey and the Turkish startups by itself, I think, are positioned in a very interesting point, compared to maybe other countries. Although it's very relevant to come if you're European or Asian or American. But the Turkish startups basically are part of the region. Okay, so you look at the region where they're really close to it. They culture-wise are close, and even by religion. So there are a lot of advantages. I know that they're very well respected. The Turkish entrepreneurs and the ecosystem is very well respected, and I've seen a lot of interest into that. Specifically, I won't get into right now in specific incentives and so on, because the list is very long. If anybody wants to know specific things that can assist them in entering the Saudi market, I would be gladly share more or connect in person. But in general, I would say the potential is huge, specifically in that country. And one last thing to consider as well, and this is a fact. We're talking about maybe today, when you're looking at Saudi, you're looking at UAE, you're looking at the countries that are very strong with oil. They have become the most financially stable countries in the world. Now, there isn't one respected investor, global investor from the US, from Europe, or etc., that is not knocking on the Saudi and UAE doors and Qatari and even Kuwaiti for money. They are the most stable countries right now in the world. If you look at the global financial crisis or so on that we're in the past year and a half, so the potential there is huge. But you need patience, and you need to be very specific, and you need an expert that would assist you in entering. That's with that I will conclude the answer.
Oh, thank you so much, Paulo. You raised your hand.
I have a question. Yes, I have a question. Actually, I knew that this time would come. So I have a question for both of you, Ohad and Ece. So since we in Tenity, we manage mostly fintech accelerators, so we are pretty vertical on that. And I want to ask you a very vertical question on that. So of course, MENA and Southeast Asia, in terms of verticals, technology, and sectors, are very strong on Islamic fintech, which is very interesting because it's a trend which is growing so much, especially in probably not directly in Singapore, but in Malaysia and Indonesia. But they are your neighbor, and of course in MENA. So, what's your perspective or your point of view on this emerging trends and its impact to the countries, and given the fact of the globalization, and of course, since we are on market access seminar, how would be if you see some opportunities between the traditional fintech and Islamic fintech from the startup perspective. I know that the question is very long, but I hope you can capture the context.
Ohad, what do you think about it?
Okay, so first of all, I think it's an interesting point. I can give you an example. So first of all, I think you're right, and I think this is something we're talking about basically the Islamic compliance. Startups that are basically connected and follow the Islamic compliance regulations and so on. I think it could give an advantage in specific countries. I can tell you that in our last cohort in Hafla, I had a very impressive fintech startup that belongs to a Kuwaiti team based in Copenhagen. Okay, they registered in Bahrain specifically, and they focused on entering Saudi Arabia. Okay, so think about it. Kuwaiti team based in Copenhagen, registered in Bahrain, entering Saudi Arabia. And in a country like Saudi Arabia, being they stated, and they were 100% an Islamic compliant startup, fintech startup, they had a lot of advantages and a lot of traction. So my answer would be very important. Depends on the country. Could be this is something for a fintech startup to look into to see if you can I'm not saying only focus on that, but offer those ways of conduct and abilities, when you look into specific markets. And the answer is yes, very, very, very relevant. And it's a trend which is raising up. And I would say that in general, as part of the as fact of, you see the countries that are the ecosystems are being evolving and moving to the next phases. There's always the aspect of their personal pride and being connected to the religion and being connected, specifically when you're talking about countries that are, very conservative and traditional. So when you look at Saudi, it's very relevant. When you look at the UAE, you would see a much more liberal country, which is like New York or London, and maybe there. I wouldn't say that would be an issue. And so on and so on. When you look at the more Islamic countries and so on. But it's a crowd. You have the customers in the market that is looking for that. So I think being agile and being relevant to those types of customers is very important.
Okay, thanks, Fuad.
For Singapore,
would you like?
Of course, there's a huge population. I think the second religion is not first or the second. You can see or hear the praise and everything in Singapore too. So it's also the Islamic fintech startup, as we call them, growing and gaining momentum in Singapore as well. So there are some Islamic finance news and information platform serves as a hub for global Islamic economy, but also as well as some crowdfunding platform that focuses on ethical and halal investments, including real estate and business financing, I would say. But considering Islam, there are also some let me say there is also Islamic finance institutions in Singapore, which is home to several Islamic bank and financial institutions in the region. For those who is related to the fintech, that side of the world, they can check the institution itself. But also we have a halal industry, actually, focusing on developing halal industry, which includes halal foods, as well as cosmetics and pharmaceuticals. So this is also a very interesting part of the Islamic startup ecosystem itself, which is growing in Singapore.
Okay. Thanks, Ece. Thanks, Ohad. Very insightful answers from, of course, your perspective, since you are more engaged with this different ecosystem than me. So I will leave the question to the real audience and just I just was curious.
Thank you so much. We have another question, by the way. I'm sending from the chat box as well. In the risk-averse markets, as far as the investments is concerned, are not attractive to early-stage startups because they inherently require risk-taking. Fiscal incentives will be important only to late-stage startups. Should we conclude that these markets are only really interesting to Series A, Series B startups? Ohad, would you like to answer? Or Ece?
Yes, I just want to know if it's possible. I see the question is from Paolo. From what country is it?
Any country, I think there's no specific. I would say for Singapore, yes, you have to have market-ready product in order to receive the investments from Singapore. They need all the documentation from your businesses. So in order to receive the Series A and B.
I would say that regarding MENA, that won't be a good conclusion for things. I think early stage startups are very relevant, specifically in these periods of time, and I think there's a lot of potential for early stage startups. And of course, compared to Series A and B, I asked before, where's the person that asked the question from? Because when you say Series A and B, it really differs from market to market, to understand what's a Series A in Singapore or the US or I don't know what, compared to a Series A or B in MENA, because the numbers are much lower. So that's a question by itself. When you look at evaluation or what's a Series A compared on when you look at the numbers. But in MENA, I think the potential, and you saw the numbers of investments, which I showed you in my slide share. You have a lot of programs, a lot of investors, a lot of funds that specifically focus on early stage startups are looking for that as well. And the number of startups that are receiving an investment as Series A and B are much lower because the amounts are higher. And so yeah, that's what I would say. The startups in the initial phases have a lot of potential in addition to the ones that are in later stages.
Thank you so much for your answer. Since we talk about Series A and Series B startups, this question might be for early stages more, but I'm asking you to both. How can startups determine the market size and potential demand for their products or services in MENA and Singapore?
I would say start with doing your own research, actually, about the sector itself, whether the sector is there, popular, and grown in the market, and then you can always contact with me. We have prepared decks for each sectors, which you can receive a general information of the specific sector in food, AI, or I don't know, a healthcare, let's say, or fintech. You can just directly ask me for those information as well.
Thank you, Ohad.
I would say that basically, again, this is a general answer in some ways to any market, but which is relevant. But do your market research. Gather data on demographics, consumer behavior, trends. Do your competitor analysis, study competitors to identify gaps, understand competition. Focus on a specific country. Again, MENA, you have to decide which country you're focusing on. This is the first thing you should look into. Target audiences, profiling, define the audience, and then and tailor offering accordingly. try to launch maybe a pilot, the first pilot testing, to see and try to see, how things are potentially partnering, as I said before, creating partnerships and networking with relevant and good local partners would be very, very important at this stage, which I truly recommend. And one additional thing that I can say is conduct initial meetings. I really think that two types of firms that are very relevant in your initial inquiries that you should connect with. One is legal firms. So look into and identify leading firms that have worked with startups in your sector in the country that you're interested to enter. You can always conduct a first meeting with no charge in order to understand, ask questions. So this is the first thing. Through them, you can understand, and ask some questions, that could be relevant for you. You have an hour meeting and try to assess a direction and to understand some recommendations. And you have the financial advisors, accountants, and so on. I recommend that as well. Or in your country, if you're in Turkey and legal firms or legal accounting firms and so on, or advisors that work in Turkey that specialize in those countries, could be very relevant. We do that in Hafla. so that's always an additional option if anybody is interested. But yeah, that's my answer.
Well, thank you so much for your answers. I know that I asked a lot of questions, but you answered them. And really, thank you so much. Paula, I guess we are close to end of this session.
So thanks everyone for of course the audience, and definitely Ohad and Ece, and of course thanks Elida for all the insights, all the supports of this market access. So startups, now the time is now it's your time to reach out to Ohad and Ece for market access questions on everything. I know that I unleashed this thing, so you receive a lot of emails and contact, but it's good. So here you have the QR code for your feedback on the market access and for other things. Of course, we'll hear for you guys. So thanks very much, and see you around.